Hoisington, and the date today is June 19th, 2008. What, can you turn it off?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, talk about your first childhood memories of libraries in general.
They weren't positive because we lived in a little kind of well, it was a farm town, you might say, and the library was inadequate, and also we lived so far from the library that I couldn't really walk there. So it wasn't, and when I did go there, it wasn't fun. It was more like a store. It wasn't pleasant.
Where did you grow up?
In Puente, in Southern California, 25 miles directly east of Los Angeles.
How important was reading to you when you were growing up?
It was elusive because when I was 7, I had a life-threatening illness, and I had to be out of school for several months in the hospital for nearly 6 weeks. And when I left my classroom, I was in the silver reading group, and when I came back, I was in the frogs. And I don't have pleasant memories of reading since then. But actually, no, when Nancy Drew, that was when I was 7. So about 12, Nancy Drew things came, and that got exciting again because we all wanted to trade our Nancy Drews.
That's right. How about childhood favorites besides Nancy Drew? Anything
Oh,
else?
the first book I ever remember was my father reading to me. He tells me this, I don't remember it. A little book called The Little White Teddy Bear Who Didn't Want to Go to Bed. And apparently he was forced to read it every single night. And then in the hospital, while I was in the hospital, not the Oz books, the Raggedy Ann and Andy books came out. And I found those exciting. The idea that the nursery turned alive at night, that was exciting to me. And then later on, I remember the Oz books. A friend that lived around the corner that was like a sister. I would be at her house a lot, and her mother, I can remember sitting on the rug. Her mother would read all of the Oz books to us, which was fun.
Did you have an awareness of your community while you were growing up?
Yes, it was a little town, and it was the kind of thing, a place where everybody knew everybody else. And it was like, it does take a community to rear a child. And so you felt responsible to every other person in town if you didn't do anything wrong, because you just didn't. That's all there was to it. And it was completely safe to wander the hills or wander the town, and our parents didn't worry about us. We just told them where we would be, whose house we were nearest. Mm-hmm. So I did feel a responsibility, and I felt a connection to the people that were important in my life, the schools and the church at that time, the Sunday school teacher, and the people who were in the shops downtown. We knew all of them, and I felt quite a tight community. It was a wonderful place to grow up, as a matter of fact.
How about after you left your community? Where did you complete your education?
We went to junior college. Bill and I both went to junior college right there at Mount San Antonio Junior College in Pomona. Not Pomona, Walnut. And then we went to UC Santa Barbara. And it wasn't the campus that it is now. It was the last, we were up on the Riviera. We were the last class that graduated. And the reason I went there was because my 3rd grade teacher went there. And I had decided to become a teacher in 3rd grade. And that's where she went, so that I had no question that I was going there.
So after you left college, then what, did you go to immediately get a teaching job?
I did. I taught in my own hometown there for 3 years, and Bill got drafted. So he was away. My mom died. My father needed me, so I stayed with my father. And my first class was kids that I had babysat when they were little, and it was really. And also, that 3rd grade teacher was teaching at that school when I went back to teach. Wow. It was a thrill for me. I don't know that it was for her.
Oh, it was. That's neat. So what attracted you to Lafayette?
Bill came to law school in San Francisco, and so we had to move north. And I had a job at Orinda. I got the job in Orinda before we came. And so we drove out to Orinda to look for a place to live because we checked Berkeley thinking he could drive one way and I could drive the other. And well, we had been from this farm community. We'd never lived behind or top or under somebody before. And so we got really depressed and we decided we'd come out to Orinda and see my school, which we never found. But we had a sandwich and started looking for a place to rent, and there was nothing in Orinda. So we just started coming east, and the first thing we saw was Sunset Village. And we called a number there, and the lady came out, Bernice Mills. Did you ever know her?
I recognize the name.
Wonderful lady, a librarian and a weaver. And she came and she showed us her apartment, which was 2 bedrooms and no stove, no refrigerator, and $100 a month. Well, so we told her we really appreciated her time, but that we couldn't handle that. She said, "I bet you'd like my little 1-bedroom downtown on Chestnut." She took us down to this little house that had paneled dining room, beam living room, a refrigerator and a stove, and it was 85. So we lived there for the next 6 years.
Wow.
And she was the most wonderful woman to know. We really liked getting to know her. She lived in an adobe out on Release Valley Road. Did you know that one? It's not a huge adobe, but it's on, as you drive out, it's on it would be on the right side, which isn't north at that point where she lives. It's not north, I don't think. But it was only about 1/8 of a mile out Release Valley Road.
So how did Bill get to the city then?
That was interesting as far as Lafayette is concerned. The little store where the rug shop is now, the Oriental Rug Shop, was the bus company, Greyhound bus station. And he and a lot of other guys, he got to meet a number of guys riding in and out because a lot of people rode to both Oakland and the city on the Greyhound bus.
So what year did you come here then?
57.
Okay. And then you bought this house in
63. And we bought it on a fluke because one of the ladies that lived with us in the apartment complex, there were just 6 little apartments. She was a realtor. And one day she said, "I have a house I want to show you." We said, "Don't waste your time. We have no money and we don't want to move." So she brought us up here when Bill came home. He saw this street and we saw this house with a fireplace and a Dutch door. So the next day he found out where he could borrow the money. And then we decided, we'll come back and we'll see what's the matter with it. And we did. All the crooked doors and the cracks, and it didn't make a difference because we had already decided we fell in love with it the night before.
Now, here's a zinger. Defining the goals of a community as a place of mutual support, shared values, and acceptance of difference. How do you see Lafayette meeting these goals?
Well, I didn't see it meeting them strongly when we first came here. That I've always, I think, had that in mind because of, I think it was my mother. My father was more of a homebody. He didn't enjoy visiting, and I think my mother was always concerned about what was going on around us in the community and that kind of thing. And when we first came here, that was late 57. But in the 60s, in the middle or early 60s, there was trouble with people that came that were dark-skinned or different ethnicity. You know that because you lived here. Maybe you did. Maybe you were too young. You were too young. You wouldn't have known. So some people started, and we got involved in the Council for Civic Unity. And it was I guess the location, if it had an address, it would have been Orinda. But a number of people worked hard with that. And one of the things that we would do would be go to people if we knew someone was going to move into a neighborhood and talk to the neighbors ahead of time, that kind of thing. And I don't know because things are so different now than they used to be. And I cut out from the newspaper the picture of our mayor today giving an award to the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, right. Oh.
And I want to give it to the person that I remember most from the Council for Civic Unity if she didn't see it, because here are these two.
Mike Anderson and Larry Dewson.
Yes, very black men in our town taking such strong positions, and it just warms my heart for how much has happened in those. It's been 40 years, but it's a place where we get along much better than we used to. I don't like the idea that some people are so strong about not wanting to pay for our services and that kind of thing. That bothers me about our town still, the narrow-mindedness of that, but I suppose one finds that everywhere.
What are your earliest memories of the Lafayette Library?
That little library, what was the 40s library you called it?
I think it was in the 40s.
It was this, I thought it was a boxcar actually, and it probably wasn't. It just seemed to me that it was, and it was located at where the old library is right now, out toward the street. There was a little lawn around it, if I remember right.
Kind of where the dentist's office is?
No, not that far down, I don't think. More like on that little
Oh,
lawn space
oh,
out in front of the library
okay.
now. You'd walk in, the door was in the middle, you'd walk in and the checkout counter was right there, and you turn right and went to children's, and you turn left and went to something else. It must have been adults. And it was so teeny. And I don't remember why I ever went there, whether I was looking for a book to read at school to my kids or what. I certainly didn't do much adult reading in those years. I did mostly children's reading at that time. And that's the only memory I have of it. And then the 60s too library, I don't know where I was not paying more attention to it, what was going on with the building of that.
How often do you personally use the current library?
All the time we've lived in Lafayette, I have checked out one book, one video, and I used to go and look in Standard & Poor's to find out who was the CEO of some organization, some company, if I wanted to write a scathing letter to that company.
Yet you spend so much of your time volunteering, so it's the sense of community.
Yes.
The library is for everyone, even
Yes.
if you personally aren't as using it as much as other people.
No, we like to buy our own books, and we have lots of books, and we have more books than we can ever read. In fact, sometimes when we think there's a really good one, we just buy two and give one to the library. But I think in a free society, a library is the most important part of the community.
So here's a good question then. How do you feel a library serves a community?
I think it's the heart of the community. People often think their church is the heart of their community. Well, it might be for them, but that is a separate entity with their beliefs. But the library, I think, should serve as an open door to everybody in the community, no matter what their beliefs are. Yeah.
You're right.
And also, for people who don't read, there's an opportunity for people to learn to read at the library, or for people who can't get around, there's an opportunity for them to find things in the library. So there are all kinds of differences that can be, I think, met with a good library. In fact, some of them are being met right now with our lousy library.
Right, exactly. So talk about your involvement in the library.
I first got involved, I went to that little old library for something, I can't remember, it must have been a children's book. But then in the library that's there now, I first got involved with the Friends. And Joan Merriman asked me to come on the board in the 70s, along with Homer Schreiber. And the reason she asked us to come on the board was because she wanted us to vote against something that was going to be coming up. And I don't even remember what it was. And my position was membership chairman, and I don't think I have ever done such a poor job of anything. I didn't have time for this. I couldn't seem to teach in 24 hours. I just couldn't seem to do it. And I just did a horrible job with my position there. And so I went off that board immediately, and then didn't come on again till maybe 20 years ago now or something like that.
Well, you're still working?
No, it wasn't 20 years ago. It was, yes, it was while I was doing my early retirement time.
Okay.
So it was in the late 80s.
So you had a little more time.
Yes.
And what other community projects or organizations have you been involved in Lafayette?
The first one we ever became involved in was the Lafayette Democratic Club, which is now the La Miranda Democratic Club. We knew, the people we got to know first were people in that club. And I worked on the sesquicentennial. And I think that I got involved in being interested in what goes on at the city council because the neighborhood, I'm involved with the neighbors, and the neighborhood has to do with the city. And I worked with the incorporation of the city, helped get it incorporated.
Oh.
And the one before that, worked on the one before that, which was unsuccessful, when we tried to become a taxed city. And that didn't work, so that's why we settled on a no-tax city, which was a mistake then and still a mistake today. Yeah.
So you remember the 40s library, not so much the 60s library. But talk about, do you know when we started talking about this current library we're building, can you think of people who were involved in
Yes.
the 1996 study?
No, before that. Do you
Okay.
mind if I start
No,
with the one
please.
before that?
Please, please.
There was a group that was working in the early 90s. And I think that it probably was, the spokesman for it, I think probably was Tatson, Don Tatson, because he was on the group and very active with the group. He's the one that represented the council, and I can't think if there was another council member on it. I believe that Gail Olkema by that time had gone.
Was Ann? No, she wasn't.
No, Ann Groden wasn't involved in this. Maeve Pessis was. The chairman of the committee was Gilson, Mike Gilson. He was an excellent chairman. And on the committee also was Laudenberger.
Oh, Walt Lautenberg.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And maybe, I'm not sure the other fellow who is still alive that is a taxpayers association person.
There were two of them.
And that committee, what that committee was doing was working on not just a library, but city council chambers, city offices, in other words. And actually, there was a very good plan. There was an excellent financial plan. Times were good then for finances. And the plan had been to include both of them in the same structure. And it was going to go forward, I think, because everything that was worked on paper showed that it was a successful thing to do, a wise thing to do. But the Taxpayers Association killed it. So then we started again after some time when Ann Groden, or I don't know if it was Don or Ann, who started up the next committee to study a library. And at that point, we started all these explorations around I think I've been to more than 20 different libraries, looking at what's good and what's not good, or what we wanted, or what they thought was good about their libraries, or what they didn't like about their libraries, and tried to get as much of that knowledge through as we could. I don't know how much.
So that was the Vision Task Force?
That was the Vision.
And you were on that one?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I was on that one for the school board.
Uh-huh, and that was, I think that was presented in 2000, because I believe it's called Vision 2000. So we worked on it several years before the document came out. And along the way, someplace, I remember Gail Olkema, because I remember sitting in a room with her, and I think it was maybe the first committee. And someone said, gee, one of our biggest problems is we have all these kids that come there after school. And I'll never forget her saying, where else would we want them to be? What better place would we want them to be? And that that pops into my mind every time I hear it when we're trying to solve the problem of the children after school.
How did this vision evolve into a real plan? Do you remember that?
I think it was Ann Groden who wouldn't let it drop. The plan was presented, and then I don't think anything was done for a while, and I think she kept pushing, and I don't think it really became a plan until she started the Lafayette Community Foundation and showed that there was a way to do this. There was a way to gather the money, that there would be. She never gave up. She always said, yes, we can do this, even though people like Maeve, who liked to figure with numbers and so forth, and could almost prove that we weren't able to do it logically. But Ann kept saying, yes, we can, yes, we can, yes, we can. And the community came through.
So you think, that Ann was one of the people that created the change from a limited number of people, expanded it into a bigger community-wide.
I think it was her vision that did that, and her tenaciousness, really.
How about the idea of the Learning Center / consortium?
Oh, I think that is the most exciting thing, one of the most exciting things I've ever heard of. And to me, it's one of the reasons, not that I wouldn't work for a regular library, but I think this library is going to be just fantastic, because I think that it's a way to share with other communities in our area that don't have as much as we have. I think it's a way to provide programming. I think it's almost like, this is too extensive, but it is the same concept as a community college, the lifetime learning situation. And I think that we have no limit on what we can do with that.
So that kind of explains why the new library is important to you. So what made you want to participate in its development?
Because of my feeling that the library is the most important thing in the town.
What have you enjoyed the most in participating?
The people I've met, and the generosity of this community, the generosity and the idea that people will give and give and give. Not just talking about money, time, energy, enthusiasm, ideas. It's just, you can't go to a meeting without coming away thinking you've learned something or inspired by the people with whom you live.
Do you recall any obstacles in the process?
Yes. I'll tell you that it was the Taxpayers Association.
Is it Don Lively?
Yes, Don Lively was the other person.
So how did we overcome that, do you think? Those people who were the naysayers?
I think that they have seen, especially Don Lively, because he is a person that tries to look at more than one side, even though he so strongly believes in his position. I think that he has been shown that it will work, that we aren't being too extravagant, even though we are being extravagant in a way that we have this whole consortium where some people thought we only needed a box with books in it. And I think that if he lives long enough, bless his heart, he might not, to see the consortium become successful and how we can share those kinds of things with other people. I hope.
Now, could you think of people who you've observed making an impact on the library? I mean, who are some of the people that you feel have played a primary role in getting this thing
Ann
going?
Groden, Don Tatson, our librarian, our county librarian, Ann Kane, our interim librarian for a while, Laura O'Donoghue, who was so careful with the planning, and the skills of people like Steve Falk, and his enthusiasm for it, and the knowledge always in the back of our mind that he was going to stand behind us for this project, and Meredith's skills, Maeve Pessis, even though she was contradictory a lot of the time in terms of what she thought would happen. She thought we were going too far too fast. She still has worked a long time with the friends and wanted this to happen. She was reluctant to say, yes, we can do it, but I think that she truly wanted it to happen. Oh, and our current librarian, Susan Weaver, of course.
Do you have a memory, a good memory of a particular thing of your involvement in the library, or anything that was fun or rewarding?
I think it was mostly fun. When we had the groundbreaking was to be done not with a shovel, but with this great, what do you call it, the tool that...
the backhoe?
The backhoe, a very large backhoe. And all of us are environmentally concerned, and our library was to be a very, very green library. And so during the groundbreaking, I don't know if you were there, I think you were there, and we had the countdown, and we went 3, 2, 1, and the backhoe did a huge puff of black smoke into the air and didn't do anything. And so we had to count over again to see if it could get going. And it was so the opposite of what we wanted to happen, but it was so funny.
What transformation have you seen in Lafayette concerning the new library?
The number of people that are concerned with the library. It was inadequate before. We've had fine staff in the library for years and years who have tried to help people, but it was just so unpleasant being in that little building, and people would bring their children. It was so crowded. It still is. And our children's librarian is the best one we've had that I can remember. She just is so enthusiastic. People are coming because she's so skilled. But I think that when people are asked to be on these committees to help out with an event, the library becomes theirs. And it seems to me that we've just spread out like tentacles with getting people involved.
What's most exciting to you about the new library?
The consortium.
Want to elaborate on that any?
If it works, I hope I'm not being repetitive, but
No.
if it works, it's going to offer so many different programs, so many different ideas, so many different ways of learning, from old to young, and the different varieties that there will be of context. And the idea that we don't know how to make it work. That's exciting, because we know we're going to, but we're not sure how yet.
Yeah. Why do you think that the citizens of Lafayette have responded so enthusiastically to this new library project?
It's contagious. Everybody that's had anything to do with it, except for the naysayers, who are so few, have become infected by the possibilities and by the enthusiasm. I think that I don't know, when you ask anybody to do anything, nobody says no.
What outcome do you hope for most with the new library?
There's no way the library as a library, the county library in the Lafayette building, can't succeed. That will succeed because we have a terrific staff. It's going to be a very fine building. We're going to support it, keep it open more hours. We know that will happen. So the thing that I'm putting my enthusiasm behind, or the thing I'm most anxious about, is the consortium part.
Okay. So that's what you're looking forward to the most, is the programming.
The programming of that, yes.
It was said that the internet would kill the printed word long ago or something, and libraries would become obsolete. How is our library going to avoid such a fate?
Well, for one thing, the county staff, the whole county library staff is so involved in electronics and what's going on there. They're ahead of, every time I go to a commission meeting, that isn't true. Often when I go to a commission meeting, we have some presentation of what's going on electronically with new ideas and all that kind of thing, that even if we in Lafayette didn't want to have anything to do with it, we wouldn't have any choice, because the county library is so up on it. For instance, this thing that they have, this Book of Go-Go, Library of Go-Go,
right.
that it's the first one on the continent.
Just like the consortium was the first.
Yes.
Let's see. Now, Brenda Hepler, who's the woman who came up with this whole concept of these oral histories about the library, her supposition is that libraries build communities, or communities build libraries, but libraries build communities. So how do you think that this new library is going to sort of affect or enhance or better serve our sense of community?
Well, first of all, the library itself, as a library, will have more materials, books and other materials available to our community. So there will be more people going there and borrowing things, and more people using it. The building will be beautiful, so people will want to be in it. But then I'm hoping that people will become interested in the consortium programs and become very interested in coming to them and supporting them, young people and old people.
Now, you mentioned one name, but is there anyone else you think we should contact for an interview? Say maybe.
My guess is
Anybody else you can think of? We tried with Joan, but
you know, I think it would be a wise thing to get the viewpoint of Gail Alkema, because she was a council person here for 18 years before, in the very beginning when this started, and I'd like to have her views now on how far we've come, and maybe we should do it a little later after the library is completely open.
There'll be 2 tapes worth of it. Now, have I left anything out? Any final thoughts that you want to?
I don't think so. I think I've probably gone overboard with the consortium ideas.
I think that's great. No, that's what we're asking for, your opinion. So.